Hey, welcome back. Lesson 2, the process of Bible translation. Is it a problem that we don't actually contain or have possession of the original manuscripts anymore? If not, how can we really know that the Bible we have today is what the author originally intended? This is a huge question that we need to answer, and we're going to look at in this lesson in understanding the process of Bible translation. Now, there's a couple of different philosophies of Bible translation, which we covered last lesson, but now we're going to focus in on a textual basis for the translation process. In the 19th century, there's two gentlemen named Westcott and Hort, and they actually developed the first critical New Testament. And what I mean by critical is New Testament textual criticism basically means is you're comparing and contrasting all of the different manuscripts to ensure that we have come as close to the original wording as we possibly can. And so that is what New Testament textual criticism is. So in the 19th century, Westcott and Hort created this textual basis on which a lot of modern translations continue to utilize this day. And it provides these guidelines in how to interpret them. Now, another type of process that is into this is the informational basis. Now, they all go hand in hand here. And in the informational basis, it's the discovery and the utilization of papyri. And if you remember from last lesson, we talked about the huge discovery in Egypt from those two individuals, and they discovered 1,800 manuscripts, but they continue to discover more and more. Now, when you look at the papyri, this was the way in which ancient authors would compile based off of the papyrus plant, and the average shelf life of a papyrus plant when it was made into paper is 110 years, and it was typically rolled up and put into a codex. And at that time, too, most of the scribes were copying and copying and copying the different manuscripts as Paul's writing it, as the Gospels were going out. So eventually, the originals would wear out. Now, that's not that big of an issue because as we look at this, the amount of documentation and the amount of manuscripts we have is significant. Now, there's 4 categories of manuscripts that we find. We have the papyri, and that is a material-based. We have the majuscule. This is a script-based in uppercase, which is typically attributed and is written in Greek between the 4th and the 8th century. We have the minuscule script-based, which is in lowercase Greek, and that's about 8th century to the 12th century. And then we have lectionary. Lectionary was content-based. It was typically used within the churches for practices and stories and the way in which church was to be conducted. And we have those between the 8th and the 16th century. Now that we have the categories of manuscripts, we need to look at selecting the translation. Now, here's a huge thing that we all need to understand. The goal of translation is to get the most accurate capture of the original language in your vernacular. So the receptor language for us is English. How can we get the most accurate translation in English from the Greek? That is a huge, huge issue. So we have the form-based. How the original language utilizes the word is dictating how it is translated into the receptor language. Then we have the meaning-based. What the word means in the original and how it is incorporated into today. Now, when you translate the Greek word, there's 2 different ways you can translate a Greek word. You have the syntactical translation and you have the lexical translation. The lexical is actually what the word literally means. So the syntactic translation is what that word means in the context of the sentence. And both of those issues take time in research and development to make sure we are copying the most accurate translation into our language. So which Greek manuscripts do we use in modern translations? Well, there's 2 major ones. There's the Textus Receptus, and then there is the critical text. The Textus Receptus is the one that is primarily used from the King James Version, and this was produced out of the 15th century by a theologian named Erasmus. Now, as we look at this, the critical text relies on older manuscripts than the Textus Receptus, and it utilizes all what we currently have now, 5,800 manuscripts. Right? So the Textus Receptus is a Greek translation made by Erasmus that is built off of roughly a half a dozen Greek New Testaments dated no earlier than the 9th century, whereas modern critical translations use much older manuscripts and use 5,800 manuscripts. So you can see there's a disparity between the two, between what the King James Version uses and what the modern translations use as well. So when we look at this, we understand, and we need to understand the different variables in the translations, the form and the functions of the translations, and what does this look like for the Bible that you currently possess on your desk. Come back next time for our next lesson as we continue to dive and research this more.